Good morning, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein. This is Valley Beth Shalom online, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Shabbos morning Torah study for a chilly December morning. This morning, I'm joined, as always, with my dear friends, Rabbi Sherre Hirsch of the American Jewish University and Rabbi Marc Gellman of Golf Digest and beautiful South Florida. I'm delighted to have you guys. I hope everybody is well. This morning in the Torah, we read the climax of the story of Father Jacob. We've been following Jacob on the journey taking off from his home, taking off to the east into Mesopotamia, meeting his uncle, marrying first Leah and then Rachel, and the women that they bring with them, the ladies in waiting, and the birth of this great family of 12 sons and a daughter. And now the prophecy comes to Jacob that it's time to go home. But going home carries a terrible burden because it means that Jacob has to meet the mess that he left at home. He has to meet the brother that he cheated. He has to meet the parents that he tricked. And to go home and meet the mess that you left at home is quite a task. And he starts on his way home, and he has these moments of tremendous anguish. And the Torah's beautiful image of this is he crosses the family to the other side, and then an angel comes and wrestles with him till morning. And just before Jacob is about to beat the angel begs for a mercy, and Jacob says, "Bless me." And his name is changed from Jacob, Yaakov, which represents the heel. He's holding on to his brother's heel. Yaakov is the follower. He's the grasper. His name is changed to Yisrael, the one who wrestles with God and prevails. And that gives him the strength to approach his brother in the morning. The two brothers come at each other, and the Torah, in a beautiful, beautiful constructed narrative filled with suspense, because you don't know till the very last minute what Esau's intentions are. You don't know whether he's come to kill his brother or to reconcile with him. They come close to each other. And then in a moment of beautiful, beautiful melting away of the heart, the two embrace each other. It's a remarkable moment. All of the brokenness of the brother relationships elsewhere in the Torah, all of the brokenness melts away. Cain and Abel, the sons of Noah, Abraham and his brother, Isaac and Ishmael, now Jacob and Esau, that melts away, and the two brothers embrace each other. And there is a sense of solidarity for the first time, a sense of possibility that human beings might yet make peace, yet make oneness with each other. It's a really wonderfully triumphant story. But the Torah doesn't end there, because life isn't like that. Because we'd like to have these moments when the credits roll and the drama is over, but the drama resumes. And now we have the story of Jacob living in Canaan, the rape of his daughter Dinah, the destruction of the people of Sherre. And this is what the Torah portion is about. And then the hinting that the next story is about to begin. And the next story, of course, is the cycle, the novella that begins at the end of the book of Genesis, that follows the career of Joseph and his brothers, another brother drama. As well, this week, as we read Parshat Vayishlach, we're getting ready for the holiday of Hanukkah. And Hanukkah presents a whole nother series of interesting stories. Also a brother story, by the way, but also a really interesting question of who we are and where we fit in the world, and what this time of year means to those of us who embrace Torah, who embrace Judaism. For some of us, this is a time of light and joy and celebration. For others, it raises all sorts of very vexing questions. So I want to take some time this morning and talk about this holiday of Hanukkah. Sherre, why don't we begin? I know that your family has a career making Hanukkah because you're in the lighting business, and you have children at home. So tell us about Hanukkah in the Hirsch home.
Well, let me just say that Hanukkah is not the most important holiday in the Jewish calendar, and nor is it the, significant religious holiday. It's a historical holiday, but I love it. It goes very viscerally. It's very emotional for me because, as you mentioned, our family had a lighting store. We literally sold fixtures and light bulbs. And I can remember selling them as early as the age 5. So lighting was our business. And we lived in Palos Verdes, and my father had found a glass case to put this huge menorah in, and it sat out front of the store, and we Persome Nesa. It was the one time a year we were out in front in Palos Verdes, which wasn't very Jewish at the time, announcing that we were a Jewish store and that our lights were Jews. Like what was lighting this store were Jews. And then on top of it, my parents, every holiday was a big deal, but Hanukkah, we have collected Hanukkah for years and years and years. And so I took a lot of the traditions that we had from my childhood and brought them to my adulthood. So every night we light about 50 Hanukkahs. And the last night it's like a bonfire. We lit someone's hair on fire over a year, which was not a good story. I won't go there. But you can imagine it's this idea, and we go all out. It's big every night. Obviously this year it's a little different. But even though it's not this sacred holiday, there's something about bringing light to the darkness and celebrating every miracle. One year I sent out holiday cards that had pictures of each of my children, and it said, "Our miracles, happy Hanukkah." So I know it's not a religious holiday. It's not Yom Kippur, but my God, do I love this holiday. I know I have a lot of naysayers out there.
Well, you have one right here. I want to introduce you to the Grinch himself. There he is. There he is.
Take your Hanukkah and shove it.
No. Rabbi Gellman, what is your problem with a holiday filled with light and joy and celebration?
And oil and donuts.
Yeah, and commercial excess in which we are cravenly, clearly impersonating Christians in their holiday of Christmas and competing with Christians so that our kids don't feel completely left out. Leave aside the historical, it's not just that it isn't a religious holiday and that the book of Maccabees wasn't even included in the Tanakh. Forget all that. The truth of the matter is that the Maccabees became the priestly dynasty of the Hasmoneans, who were completely and totally corrupt, and so corrupt that when the Romans conquered the land in 70, they didn't even have to shoot a single arrow because people hated the Hasmoneans so deeply and were beginning to rally around the Pharisees, who later became the rabbis, and that became Rabbinic Judaism. In addition to that, in addition to the fact that we're celebrating the rise of a Jewish fascistic order of the Hasmoneans, even beyond that, the fact of the matter is that Hanukkah represents a kind of surrender to Jewish ethnocentrism. Let's remember what the Maccabees were against. They were against learning from the Greeks. Well, bring that to Rambam, bring it to Maimonides and ask him how he felt about Aristotle. Without Aristotle, there's no Maimonides. Without the Greeks, there's no notion of matter and form. Without matter and form, there's no idea of body and soul. Without body and soul, there's no idea of life after death, where your soul, your neshama, which isn't even found in the Torah, only nephesh, but this rabbinic idea, which they got from the Greeks, which the Maccabees hated. So our debt to the Greeks, when Alexander the Great conquered the land in 133, he brought his tutor with him. And his tutor was Aristotle. And that connection, that intellectual cross-fertilization between Aristotle and these emerging Jewish intellectuals who were itinerant teachers, and they called themselves rabbi, that was the connection that saved Judaism. It transformed Judaism for a time when we no longer had priests and the temple and sacrifices. And then finally, we have this absurdity of gift giving, which has nothing to do with the holiday whatsoever. There's Hanukkah geld that was given in Central Europe, but that was just a few coins and that was that. Now we've got the whole thing of, giving presents every day, and it becomes, it's embarrassing. And then finally, to give a little whipped cream and a cherry on top of my anti-Hanukkite rant, because every week I should have a rant, and this is my rant, is that in addition to all of that, the Hanukkah stuff compared to the Christmas stuff sucks. The truth of the matter is, what do we have that goes up against Handel's Messiah? We've got dreidel, dreidel, dreidel. I made it out of clay. I mean, we don't have anything like the depth and the richness that Christianity has for Christmas. And that's because Christianity is their most important holiday, going up against our least important holiday. In the spring, at least, I think we can Passover fights Easter to a draw. That's my view about it. But in the winter, oh my God, it's just an embarrassment. It makes Hanukkah a commercial feast, and the music sucks, and potato latkes clog up your arteries. And that's my Rabbi Gellman rant of the week.
He's seriously the Grinch, Eddie.
Bah, humbug.
Yep.
Hanukkah's a humbug, he says.
By the way, that's such an intellectual approach to the holiday. Like, I love the holiday because it's like
I'm guilty. I'm an intellectual. Okay? Should be. But that's my view about it.
So in the tradition of my rabbinic ancestors, it's time to try to rescue this holiday.
Please.
So let's take a moment and capture it for a little bit and see if we can give back some of the light of the holiday. The history is very quickly the history. Alexander the Great comes and conquers the whole world, the whole Mediterranean. And he doesn't conquer it in order to control it. He conquers it in order to spread a culture. And the culture is called Hellenism. It's the derivative of Greek culture. Greek language, Greek ways, Greek architecture, cities all across the Mediterranean, as far east as India and as far west as Spain, are now built according to the same city plan, the one that Alexander brings. And when he brings it to the Middle East, it becomes very, very, like every place else, it becomes very popular. All of the peoples that are named in the Bible, the small tribes that surround Eretz Yisrael, are all succumb. They all give up their cultures to this advance of Hellenistic culture. And we did too. That Hellenistic culture infiltrates into the very heart of Judaism. And what happens of the history basically is that when Alexander dies, his kingdom is divided into three. The European kingdom is capitaled in Rome, the Egyptian kingdom ruled by the Ptolemy family, capitaled in Alexandria, the name tells it all. And the Eastern kingdom, which is the biggest of the three, capitaled in the Syrian city of Antioch. And the king who sits in Antioch is Antiochus. And we go through some generations of that kingdom. The family's name is Seleucid, the Antiochus kings, until we get to the king who decides that he wants to sponsor a much more aggressive form of Hellenism. And the question that the Maccabees are going to raise is the following. It's not that you have no Hellenism. The book of Maccabees, which tells the story of this, the book of Maccabees is already a story which is based on a Greek sort of model. Setting up a holiday for yourself is a Greek thing to do. The Maccabees, when they do achieve independence, they win the war against the Seleucid kingship, and they establish the independence of the kingdom in 166 BCE. They mint coins. That's where we get Hanukkah geld from. And the coins, ironically, have Greek on one side and Hebrew on the other. And that's, I think, an apt symbol of the identity that the Maccabee family, the Hasmonean family, that's the name of the mishpacha, the Hasmonean family puts forward. They were Greek, but they're not to the extent of those who wish to give up all of the trappings of Jewish life, particularly monotheism. The one act that sparked the Maccabean rebellion was the installation of a statue of Zeus into the Temple of Jerusalem. Give up monotheism and you've given up the whole game. accept monotheism and you can still dabble in various aspects of Greek culture. And that really was the great question. So if you're interested at your Hanukkah table, if you're going to be with Sherre and her family and lighting 50 menorahs, so besides having fire extinguishers, the question really is the following. How much can I become part of the outside environment without losing what I really am? And how much can I assimilate into the core of my identity and my ideology? How American, for example, or how Western can I be as a Western American Jew without giving up the very core of what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be us? That's really the great question of the Maccabees.
But let me just say about that. If we don't give up our core and transform our core at a moment in history when history requires us to do it, then we die. The truth of the matter is, and this is unassailably true, and that is if the Greeks hadn't come in and brought the one thing you didn't include about which is their philosophy, if they hadn't taught these young teachers, these Pharisees and rabbis, about matter and form and body and soul and how to survive, how to create a core of Judaism, which was true. I mean, the Aristotelian theories that they taught lasted for 2,000 years. Until Copernicus, they lasted. So the truth of the matter is that there was if we had not listened to the Greeks, when the temple was destroyed, Judaism would have ended. Because the core of Judaism, if you ask someone at the time of the Maccabees, what's the core of Judaism? They would say it's very clear. We sacrifice animals. We sacrifice animals on the 3 pilgrim festivals of Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos, and the priesthood leads us, and they take 10%, and they do a lot of things, and there's no prayers, and there's no nothing. There's no nothing that can survive that, because once you don't have a temple, once you don't do sacrifices, Judaism, its core, its real core, its real biblical core, and this is why the Maccabees aren't even in the Tanakh, disappears. It disappears out of a historical necessity. And the only thing that saved us was the dialogue between the Greeks and the rabbis.
I don't disagree with the fact that Judaism persists because we've always had an ability to absorb the best ideas of the cultures amidst which we lived. The best example of this, the best articulator of this was the great Zionist philosopher Ahad Ha'am, who talked about the difference between imitation and assimilation, right? That you can absorb, or integration is a better word, that we can integrate ideas and cultural forms from outside, but we don't want to give up the deep inner core of who and what we are. And that's the great task in every generation. And it's never easy. It's never a clear black and white conversation. There have been times when we have taken in ideas and forms from outside cultures that turned out to be poisonous to us. And that's what the Maccabees were worried about. We did take the best of Greek culture and make it part of us. We took Talmudic logic from the Greeks. We took, as you said, the ideas of body and soul from the Greeks, but we rejected Greek polytheism. We rejected the ethic that assigned human beings to statuses without any possibility of seeing their innate humanness and the preciousness of human beings. And that I think is the great skill of the Jewish people.
Yeah, but you're confusing two things. Aristotle didn't believe in Zeus. Aristotle didn't believe in Hera or the pantheon of Olympus. He didn't believe in that. Aristotle was a monotheist. And for him, God was thought thinking itself, noesis noiosis.
But he did believe that a person born a slave would always be a slave and could be nothing but a slave, and that slaves had a different level of humanity and deserved different rights and privileges than those who were above, than those who were free men, than those who were soldiers, than those who were nobility. That he did understand, and that is contrary, right? Sherre, your turn.
I actually was going to take a point that you said, Eddie, a bit farther. It's not that we adopted just the best of the Hellenist or who's ever the outsider and adopted it, but retained our own. What I love about this moment is that we're encouraged to take the best of ourselves and put it out for them to learn from, right? It's normally we take it and we adopt it and then we make it enhanced Judaism. But I think this time is really one step further where we take the best of us and put it out. And I think we have other holidays like that too. Passover, we share the Seder with other people. But I think specifically with Hanukkah, it's like we just blast it out there. And I don't think the Christamization of Hanukkah, meaning all the retail making Hanukkah equal to Christmas, I don't believe in any of that. But what I do believe in is like, I have to share the story. I'm sorry, Eddie, but Eddie knows this very well, and Marcus does too, so forgive me. But when my daughter was very young, we were driving by all these Christmas lights, and she said to me, I want lights. Now, notice she didn't say Christmas lights. She said, I want lights. Of course, I heard Christmas lights, and I was like, we need to make an appointment with your rabbi immediately. And I went and took her to you, Rabbi Feinstein, and the two of you chatted. I don't even know if you remember this. And you came out, and I was sure you were going to say, no lights, no. And you came out and you said, get the lights. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, I guess she conveyed to you that what she loved about Hanukkah was to show the world that we light up the world. And to her, it wasn't about competing with the Christmas lights. It was about announcing that we were Jews. She had no fantasies that we had Christmas tree lights and green and red. She wanted like mamash lights, like a whole Hanukkah out front lit up like they do at Chabad and at Westfield Mall. And so you came out to me and you said, and that year we had a light guy come to our house and build us Jewish lights. And it turned out he was a religious Jew. I thought it was the most fascinating turn of events. But I think it's more than just adapting, but it's about showing who we are and how proud we are to be that. It's a message of courage. That's what I think Hanukkah is about, which is why I love it.
Well, the irony, of course, is that if, I'm trying to argue this. The irony is that Rabbi Gellman is right to this extent, of course, that if you see Hanukkah, the serious side of Hanukkah now, and I also happen to like dreidels and latkes and lights and menorahs and songs, and there's a beautiful goofiness to this holiday, which corresponds to the winter solstice when it's so dark and so cold and we miss each other. This year in particular, when we miss each other so badly, we're not going to be able to be together. We'll be on Zoom, and being on Zoom will be our way of being together. But the seriousness of the holiday is, if you understand this as a meditation on the question of how do we live as a minority within a majority culture, maintaining a sense of who we are and a coherence with who we've been and a future with who we intend to be, taking the best of cultures, offering the outside culture the best of us. That's what I think Hanukkah is truly, the cultural work of Hanukkah. But Marc gets upset because what we've ended up doing is assimilating not the best, but the worst of the culture around us, the crass materialism,
exactly,
the superficiality.
But that's on us, Marc. That doesn't diminish the holiday itself.
Yes, it does.
No.
It means that we're impersonating Christmas. That's what's happened to Hanukkah.
There is no impersonating Christmas in our house. This is a holiday onto itself. And granted, my teenagers tried to rebel against me and give me a heart attack by trying to make those comparisons, but they're not. It's not the same.
In your house, it isn't. But in the entire universe outside your house, that's exactly what it is.
I don't agree.
All right, that's good. That's good.
Where does the giving presents, this commercial excess, where does that come from? Where does the fact, if we're bringing our best into the world, why do Jewish kids want trees? Hanukkah bushes. Every year I had 100 of them who came to say, I want a Hanukkah bush. I said, no, that's not our thing.
Well,
But
I'll tell you about what we do is there's an article that was written by the environmentalist Bill McKibben, who's a
Yeah.
very interesting, very wonderful soul. He lives in upstate New York. He's a very religious guy, but he's one of the most outspoken and passionate environmentalists in America. And he wrote an article one year called The $100 Christmas. And every year I share it with friends. And I say, we have to do a $100 Hanukkah. And he said what happened in his church, he belongs to a lovely community church in his town. And the preacher offered this idea that this year, let's spend no more than $100. And that includes the tree, and that includes the meal, and that includes all the gifts. And he said families got together and they started having this conversation because they wanted to push back. These are Christians.
yes,
Wanted to push back on the parts of Christmas that you have articulated as so difficult. And they, a tree was important to them because it's a symbol of their family togetherness this time of year. And for those who were religious, it has religious connotations. And the meal was important because it's the gathering of the family at this time of year. But for presents, they said, because we didn't have any more than $100 for the whole family to spend, we baked pies for each other. We gave each other gift certificates for back rubs and babysitting and car washes and favors and ended up being the church community came together after Christmas and said, we have to do this every year. This made the holiday so much more personal because instead of buying you a PlayStation, which is just another tchotchke, instead what we do is we gather together, we share with each other our own abilities and our own giving. And I think it's a beautiful remedy to the excess that you are, it's a beautiful remedy to the excess that you're articulating.
absolutely. And where I was able to get my inner anti-Hanukkite soul out and express it fully was because of Tommy Hartman. So he was part of the put Christ back in Christmas. And he was as angry about Christmas as I was about Hanukkah, because of what had happened to Christmas, that it had become a commercial sop. But his solution was to call all his nieces and nephews. He was a little short on sons and daughters. And he would call them all up and he would say, listen, my Christmas present to you is that wherever you live, I will travel to where you are. And I will spend one day with you doing whatever you want to do. You and me. And that was his Christmas present to his entire family. He would call each of them and do it. And I just wrote a thing in my weekly column about spiritually acceptable Hanukkah gifts and Christmas gifts. And that includes, for example, giving memberships to zoos and museums where you support institutions and you do that. Buying only video games that solve mysteries and problems and not those that just kill aliens. Doing something that you've made on your own with your own hands. There's lots of ways that we can fight back against this, but assuming that we have a wonderful holiday here that is not in need of radical reformulation is exceedingly naive.
Marc, I'm going to tell you that this may be a generational thing because the millennials and younger, they aren't so obsessed with the tangible gifts. They're obsessed with social activism and experiences. And when you see all the things they write about what you should do for Hanukkah and what you should give, rarely is it a PlayStation. So it could be that you and I were raised in a big present time where the PlayStation mattered. Granted, it wasn't PlayStation, it was Breakout by Atari. I don't know if you remember that, but it was Atari. And my brother got one, it was a big deal. But I don't think this generation, my kids don't even think about it that way. I mean, and it's not because they're rabbis' kids, it's just this generation is much more focused on the value of experiences and being together, and they see those as gifts. They really do. They see them as a love language.
Every person I know who is my student, whether millennial or not, who has a 10-year-old kid is buying a PlayStation.
Okay.
So this happens when you have a kid. When you have a kid, they want the PlayStation.
So when you have a 10-year-old kid, and I got kids ranging from 10 to 20, those 10-year-olds, there's not a holiday that they don't think should have a present. They think Shabbat should have a present every week. I mean, one of them told me last week when his friend was over, what do you like about Shabbat? I would like it better if we got presents every week. I mean, that's just the age. But beyond 12, 13, you change the game. And I'm telling you, I think it's different now. And I think it's in the process of changing. And I think articles like yours help it change. I think young people who really talk about what is the real meaning of this holiday, like Eddie spoke of so beautifully, which I think people stand behind that and believe in it. And in some ways it's less intimidating than Yom Kippur. And so we've got to create an access point where it means something really spiritual and deep, which it does. Reduce its Christianization. I don't know if that's an actual word, but I'm making it one. And honor it, because it's a much easier access point than someone to get into Tisha B'Av.
Well, I take your point, and I believe you're right. But I do want to say what there is about Hanukkah that is worth saving, and that is beautiful and is spiritual, and that is the belief in miracles. This idea that everything we see is naturally caused, and that there is no opportunity that we have in life to encounter things that have no real rational explanation, but are, if you want to say it this way, miracles, gifts from whatever source that change our life. A teacher who just comes into your life at the moment when you have no direction. Someone you didn't even want to go out with, or your friend fixes you up and you get married to that person. A health emergency where the doctors are saying there's really no hope, and there is not only hope, but you recover and you survive and you thrive. I believe in miracles. I believe that not everything is rationally provable, even though I'm a philosopher. And I think Hanukkah urges us to believe in the miraculous. And the reason people don't believe in miracles is because their eyes are closed. Their eyes are closed to the miracles that are all around them. And if you have a standard for miracles that nothing can ever meet, you'll never see a miracle. But if you have the possibility of seeing miracles everywhere and always, then perhaps the last burning ember of meaningfulness in this otherwise difficult holiday can perhaps be redeemed.
Turns out he's not the Grinch, Eddie.
I think we just saved his soul.
I think did you see me going like this? I felt like my grandmother.
I think Scrooge has just grown a soul.
I think Scrooge has grown a soul, and I was going like this. I was channeling George Workin.
I think the project is actually more worthy than simply criticizing, but to say, can we rescue this holiday? And I would go one more step, Marc, if it's okay. I'm, look, I've been stuck at home. So part of being stuck at home means that I'm looking outside at the street in front of me, at the landscape, and I'm being very aware of the fact that the days are much shorter, the nights are much longer, it's cooler, it's quiet. I mean, it's California, so it's not cold, but it's certainly cooler here. The winter solstice. Our ancestors chose the winter solstice as a time to build this holiday because they were taken by the symbols of darkness and light. And now it's ironic, and this is the conversation I had with Sherry's daughter, is that the Christian fathers, who were literally next door to the rabbis, took the same holiday, the winter solstice, and built the Christmas holiday around it. But the idea of the winter solstice, when darkness surrounds us, and it's our job to kindle a little bit of light. And the power of the kindling of a little bit of light in a world full of darkness is the symbol that the rabbis embraced when they resurrected the holiday 300 years after the Maccabees were gone. They resurrected a dead holiday because the holiday, as you said, well, the Maccabees were hated. The Romans came and took over Jerusalem, and the rabbis, the tradition, put away the holiday. They brought it back when the Roman oppression became so difficult. Once again, darkness covered the landscape. And the rabbis wanted a symbol that a little bit of light, in this case, the light of Torah, Torah Ora, a little bit of light dispels a great deal of darkness. And that's the miracle story. The miracle of the light story doesn't occur in the original sources of the Maccabees. It's not there until the rabbis put it there 300 years later in the Breita, in the section of Talmud Shabbos where they discuss this. And that symbol, I'm taken by that symbol, and I think Jews in every generation were. And I think if this, COVID has made us aware of certain things that we never saw before. And one of the things is the light that we share with each other that we all desperately miss right now. And the sense of being together as friends and as community, and the sense of being together as family. And Marc, as you said, and I think it's terribly sad, and this is the week to say it, because each day now there's 28, 2,900, 3,000 people are dying of this disease on a daily basis. The darkness that is filling the hospitals and filling the clinics of this country. And we pray for the light, the power of medicine, the power of rationality to push back this terrible plague. A little bit of light dispels a great deal of darkness. And that's what I'm going to be celebrating this year. And I think that having a ritual, an ancient ritual to kindle these lights and to remind ourselves that we have the power of these lights, this is something very powerful to me. So I'd like to finish today with a story, if that's okay. Please. If I can ask the two of you to humor me a moment. So for many years, I've been writing stories, Grinch stories, and I wrote this one. And this is dedicated to Rabbi Gellman and Rabbi Hirsch, who have taught us this year. I'll put it up here, and anyone who's listening who would like a copy, I'd be glad to put it on the VBS website and send it to you as this one's called, I wrote 6 of them. This one's called How the Grinch Stole the Latkes. Oh, the Jews of old Jewville just loved holidays and kept them religiously in all of their ways. On Rosh Hashanah, they ate apples and honey, then came to the temple all dressed in Armani. Oh, Holy Yom Kippur, they prayed and they fasted. Through Rabbi's long sermons, they fetched, but they lasted. Till Nila was over, and they checked their clocks, then went home to break fast on bagels and lox. They sat and they feasted in glorious sukkahs, and on Simchas Torah, they danced off their togas. Came Purim, they brought to the shul their noisemakers and dressed up in costumes like Dodgers and Lakers. On Pesach, they asked Haggadahs for questions and ate so much matzah, which is bad for digestion. But of all of the holidays we Jews remember, the most special in Jewville was the one in December, with tales of brave Judah with latkes and dreidels. Hanukkah thrilled Jewville's boy chicks and maidels. Hanukkah brought all their families together to sing and to celebrate, no matter how cold the weather. But there was one among them who got no joy and no nachas from candles and latkes and dreidels and brachas. In fact, his home was so close to the sewer, it made him quite nauseous to hear ma'ost sur. Hanukkah made him angry and bluish. You'd hardly have guessed that he was born Jewish. Since his bar mitzvah, he grew not an inch. He was surly and hairy, and they called him the Grinch. He lived on a mountaintop far above town, and when Hanukkah came, he declared with a frown, I hate all your holidays. It's all hocus pocus. When I tell the story, I'm for Antiochus. Because miracles, they're all made up and fake, and anyone believes them makes a mistake. Maybe Maccabees found some oil in the temple, but it soon burned out. That's the truth, just that simple. And so, my dear children, here's the cold, hard, dark fact. If you're looking for oil, it's under Iraq. It's for you, Gellman. So the night before Hanukkah, when the town smelled of latkes, the Grinch donned his hat and zipped up his gatkes. He snuck to the town when the latkes were cooking. He spread his bad poison when no one was looking. No one got sick, and no one got fluish. But Hanukkah's bad latkes changed everyone Jewish. The Grinchy was clever with a great sense of humor, because his evil poison turned kids into consumers. When families told tales of wise Mattathias, all kids could say was, what did you buy us? We want PlayStation, Xbox, or we'll make a fuss. We want Barbies and Legos because Toys R Us. The parents, they fretted, should we light the menorah? Our children have turned to Sodom and Gomorrah. What will happen to us when the poison affects us? To keep ourselves happy, we'll have to buy a new Lexus. Soon all of Jewville was crazy with shopping. To 108 stores they went without stopping. No one sat home to sing Mia Malel, because the best things in life were at Bloomingdale. They forgot Judah's fight against gods who were foreign. What mattered to them was J. Crew and Ralph Lauren. They stopped making latkes with their special aroma, lest they could find them at Williams Sonoma. A people who once died, but their God would not switch, bow down to an idol called Abercrombie and Fitch. As the dark fell on Hanukkah, bereft of its light, the Grinch cackled loudly into the night. I knew it. The miracles are empty and false. Just give them some credit cards, bring them to malls. Soon they'll forget Rabbis Hoffman and Farkas. There's such nice things on sale down at Neiman Marcus. But there was still one in Jewville who was immune to his poison. For her, Hanukkah meant dedication, devotion. Susie LeJew was a Jew oh so loyal, but no latkes for her. She's allergic to oil. So while all of Jewville went crazy with materialism, Susie stayed home, rooted in true Judaism. She knew it was her task, like old Mattathias, to break down the aisles that bind and to tie us to gods that are false and ideals so untrue, and remind us the real meaning of being a Jew. But how? I'm just one with all of this madness. How? I'm a kid, she said in her sadness. Then she had an idea. It filled her with elation. It's what Rabbi Schulweis would have called revelation. She knew what to do. It was clear as can be. So she picked herself up like a new Maccabee. There was Judah and Simon and Yochanan too, Eliezer, Yoknatan, and now Susie LeJew. She gathered her candles and Chanukiah, and in case she got hungry, a sufganiyah, and she marched to the mall with courage, no fear. She went to do battle between Macy's and Sears. She stood in the food court, climbed up on a table. She held up her menorah as high as she's able and called out her message in a voice loud and free. Who's on God's side? Come forth. Come out to me. Everyone froze and looked on in distress. They looked out from Nordstrom's and out from Express at the little girl zealot with her great Jewish rap. They heard her at Nike's and even the Gap. A moment of silence and then a sigh of emotion as everyone woke from Grinch's bad potion. What are we doing here with all of this stuff? We don't need all this merchandise. We have enough. So they dropped all their shopping bags, all they purchased with plastic, and they all ran right home. It was fantastic. For those capitalistic, it was a disaster. The sales figures came in 10% below last year. But for those faithful to God, it was a moment to see, just like the first Hanukkah in 66 BCE. They all went right home and lit up bright shamas. They sat with their families, recited God's promise, not by might or by power, but by spirit and soul. Not by might or by power shall the world be made whole. While they all sat at home and sang Sevivon. Only Susie remained at the mall all alone. But she wasn't alone. She could smell his bad stench. So she went out into darkness. Uh-oh, it's the Grinch. He was mad beyond words. You could say he was furious, but truth to be told, he was even more curious. How did you do that? My plan you just foiled. Do you know what it took to poison their oil? I thought it was brilliant. This potion can't fail to lure them from Costco to buying retail. Susie set down her lit-up menorah and answered the Grinch from her knowledge of Torah. Don't you know? Didn't you learn in school or at home? In Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, taught Ben Zoma, to get all that you want will just make you sick. To want what you've got is life's greatest trick. Tonight, Mr. Grinch, the world's dark, the world's cold. So tonight, Mr. Grinch, the story is told how Judah the warrior set down his sword and proceeded to light up the house of the Lord. He needed pure oil to light the menorah. He needed 8 days worth, according to Torah. But they found just one jar in the temple's vast towers. They found just enough for 24 hours. Judah, he lit it because with all of his might, he believed in each person as a spark of God's light. And if all of that light we combine and we share in the night's cold, cold darkness, we know God is there. It's not the stuff, Mr. Grinch, we crave so hysterical, but sharing our light is the Hanukkah miracle. The Grinch stood transfixed. He lost all of his fight. The Grinch stood there mystified. He knew Susie was right. The Grinch was transformed that Hanukkah night. For in Susie's menorah, he saw God's true light. Since then, he's done a miraculous tshuva. He comes to the minyan. He's a shaker and mover. He sings with the choir. He knows every song, and it's said he does Hanukkah all the year long. So that is our story, dear boychicks and maidels. So when you sit down to play with your dreidels, remember brave Susie, who made friend of a foe, and that's why it's said, Nes Gadol Hayapo. To everyone, a happy and sweet Hanukkah. Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll see you next Shabbos. Sherry, light up your menorahs and light up the world. Marc, there's a soul in there somewhere. We still believe.
Don't bet on me.
I love that story. I want it. I want a copy.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.